Yeah, 153, 154. We'll go with that. So that small piece of ebony that I was fabricating, it basically filled the original slot, and that allowed me to do the math and make my compensated cantilever bridge saddle and get this intonation right on the money. And we will do the proverbial tuning test in a second, but there's a bunch of other sort of very pertinent information, especially for builders that are kind of just getting into this. But I want to talk about the saddle height and the distance to the underside of the string. I have mentioned this distance in other videos, and typically, in most cases, the distance from the underside diameter of the low E string to the surface of the soundboard, just ahead of the bridge here, it ends up being somewhere between 1/2 inch and 5/8 of an inch. Anything more than 5/8, you start to get into the danger zone. Anything less than 1/2 inch, and you're looking at a neck reset because you're just not generating enough tension on the soundboard to really drive it. So what we ended up with here is this distance here from the 6th string board is 1930 seconds. So in the middle, it's 2130 seconds. So, and then as that radius sweeps down, 1930 seconds from the underside of the 1st string to the surface of the soundboard. So as far as the structural integrity, we are definitely at the top end. You wouldn't want to go any higher than this because there are two things that could happen. One is the actual soundboard itself will start to implode around the sound hole, or the bridge will pull up and you'll get too much of a belly on the back. It ends up being just too much load for the soundboard. Now in this case, we've got a very tight grain, perfectly quarter sawn Sitka spruce soundboard. And Mike has put very tall braces inside, so it's easily handling this, and I will show you a cross-sectional view with the camera ahead of the bridge from one side to the other. And you'll see that it still has a beautiful 30-foot spherical radius 10 years later. So there's no distortion, no imploding, and we're getting lots of load, and you'll hear this guitar in a second. So let's talk about the actual fingerboard and what I ended up doing to control the trajectory of the string and reduce this height of the bridge. Michael was one of the very first people that I met when I came to Stratford over 33 years ago. And we have remained good friends since that time. Michael ended up taking the course from me when I was teaching the acoustic guitar build course. So he was building guitars when I met him. He had already built several guitars. He was already tooled up and was into it. Now, he was building primarily solid body electric guitars and some very interesting sort of experimental basses. One which I believe ended up in Sting's hands, if I'm correct. And this is his logo.
So Mike has got to be one of the most explosively creative people that I've met here in Stratford, or anywhere for that matter. The choices he's made on this guitar are really quite interesting. Of course, it's Brazilian rosewood back and sides, ebony binding at the intersection of the sides and the back, curly maple binding at the intersection of the top and the sides. The fingerboard is also Brazilian rosewood. I guess I'm doing a little bit of a review on this guitar. I'm really trying to cover some information about, why Mike showed up, 10 years after the fact, and what I ended up doing to get this guitar to the point where it is now, where it is 100% perfectly in tune and plays smooth as silk. And the sound of this guitar is a real testament to Brazilian rosewood as well. Okay, so on with the neck and the neck trajectory. So in order to get this neck to body angle correct, there were some inconsistencies along the lay of the neck, and there wasn't enough load on that truss rod. We're going to talk about that in a second. So right now, this neck to body angle is perfect. Lots of room on that saddle for years to come to adjust it as the guitar ages. So in the final analysis, as far as the neck goes, I ended up correcting the fingerboard, getting that perfect trajectory, neck to body angle, and then once the fingerboard was corrected, now this was all done with a little bit of load on that truss rod, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. So I did the complete fret job, edge dressed, leveled, recrowned, polished, and made my compensated cantilevered bone saddle, bridge saddle, and a compensated nut, of course. So I'm going to talk about this truss rod for a second. So this truss rod nut is, I've never seen one like this before. It's a full 1/4 inch. So I ended up fabricating a truss rod wrench for this. I put this socket in the drill, started the drill, and then held it against the radius sander on the drill press to thin the wall down so it could be used to adjust this truss rod. Obviously, I've got way more torque than I need. I've already adjusted it. We've got the exact amount of load we need. I wasn't too sure if Mike actually had a truss rod wrench for this or not. That's why he ended up fabricating one. Anyways, we got that. Lay of the neck is absolutely beautiful. This is a one-way truss rod. If I back it off, the neck will come up even more. But right now, we have just a whisper of relief, and the guitar plays silky smooth. I remember Mike working on this in class. He did a beautiful job piecing all these strips of Brazilian rosewood together that he had been saving for many years. All these joints are backed up with cross-grain splices that are all notched for the ladder bracing in the back. Did an amazing job in typical Mike fashion. So what's interesting is the intersection of the sides and the back, he's got ebony binding. Just flip that over. And at the intersection of the soundboard in the sides, he's got this curly maple binding with a thin little strip of ebony all the way around. Beautiful detailings. That 30-foot spherical radius gives this soundboard the strength it needs. 10 or 12 years after the fact, it is not budging. Nothing is imploding towards the sound hole. Well, when Mike dropped this guitar off to get me to do all the final calibration, he was obviously in the process of reshaping the neck. Now, Mike, I didn't get too rambunctious with this. I just smoothed it out. I didn't change the shape. Wasn't too sure what you had in mind. I did shape that neck a little bit, the volute at the top there, Mike, and then blended it into the edge of the Brazilian rosewood fingerboard. So now it's time to have a listen. Not just to the intonation, but to the actual sound of this guitar. Oh, also, the tuner for the second string blew a gears. Luckily, I had an old Grover in my junk box there to swap it out and complete the job. Actually, there's your 15 seconds of fame. That's from an old guitar that I worked on for John Till, Janis Joplin's guitarist.